We can't, as translators, put our heads in the sand over this. We have to embrace it, check it out, be openly skeptical, trust but verify, all of that stuff. I wouldn't say that machine translation, we have an over-reliance on it. I would say we have to be very judicious and careful about how that data is being maintained and archived and updated. Is it meshing with style guides that a client wants? Is it in congruence with what a translation reviewer wants? Sometimes reviewers say abroad, well, this is how we say such and such internally.
Let me ask you something. How many times have you heard AI can do all the translations now? Well, we're in an area where speed and automation are worshipped, but in clinical research, one mistranslated phrase can cost millions or worse a patient's safety. Today's guest is here to set the record straight. He's the president and owner of DTS Language Services, a company with over 50 years of experience in high stakes, high accuracy translation. While the world obsesses over flashy tech, Duncan Shaw and his team deliver real results, accurate, budget conscious, and deadline driven translations for the life sciences. He's not anti-AI, he's just not fooled by the hype. He knows the difference between real expertise and a chatbot with a thesaurus. This conversation is about cutting through the noise, debunking the biggest myths around translations in 2025, and showing you what it really takes to localize clinical content the right way. Let's dive in with one and the only Duncan Shaw. Duncan, welcome to the TMF Daily Podcast.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you very much for having me, Nicole.
We are so excited to have you on the show. Duncan, you've been in this game for decades. And when it comes to clinical translations, what's the one risk most sponsors don't even realize they're taking?
I think out of either ignorance or being so busy and stressed with so many other responsibilities and demands, they don't take the time to ask what a translator's convention about translation is, what their philosophy and approach is to a translation, because we all think, don't they just translate it? So if you ask 100 different people what translation means to define that, you won't get 100 different answers. You will get dozens of different opinions, though. I translate it so that it doesn't read like a translation. You have a million different conventions and approaches. So I think it's critical, and I tell everybody I can, it's a very boring, unsexy piece of advice, but ask what the translator's personal philosophy and approach to translation is. So many times, if people don't ask about this, it's a ticking time bomb, and it's something that might blow up down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Should you explain what an acronym means in a case report form or in a chart, and the English doesn't explain what it is? What liberties should you take or not? So many translators say, well, I want to help my people. I want to help people too, but it's not the role of the translator or right to take those kinds of editorial freedoms. So you really have to take a few moments up front in writing to talk about what the expectations are. How many times do we not clarify expectations in anything for that matter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, communication really seems key here. Asking the right questions, making sure you're going to get the results that you expect at the end.
Yeah.
In high stakes trials, accuracy isn't luxury. It's sort of life or death. And how do you make sure the language your team delivers is sort of bulletproof in the eyes of regulators and those ethic boards?
Yeah, and I think that comes down to first sharing what your translation convention is. In our case, we take a very conservative approach. So a lot of times a Spanish or Creole or Arabic translation that we do of a study title, someone might say, they're not going to understand that. That's going to be way over their head. Well, are they going to understand the English? In a lot of cases, it's a pharma literacy issue. And again, our job is to mirror the tone and technicality and content of exactly what the source language content is and how it says it. And if somebody doesn't want that, again, you've got to cross that bridge early on up front, ahead of time, before the translation begins. So it starts with embracing that philosophy. In our case, we started translating patents many, many decades ago. A patent translation is about the most literal and specific type of instrument that there is. And so this was kind of a natural progression of life sciences and clinical trials ahead, where you have to be careful of liberties. Now, patient recruitment documentation and content is different than chemical terminology, is different than, right, a protocol translation. So it can vary in the wide umbrella of life sciences, but you've got to think about, let it unfold in advance. What staffing is going to handle various aspects of a translation and QA? You can have too many cooks in the kitchen, and more QA is not better, right? So you have to have
you got that right.
a balance between checking and oversight and properly credentialed subject matter experts and proper language.
Absolutely.
A lot of people say, well, you must have a lot of doctors and lawyers and engineers and professionals in the life sciences. And I'll share something with you. Those are the folks that I love and admire and respect, but give us the hardest times.
Right.
Because of their rigorous training, they say, well, I know what this poor medical writer was trying to say, but this adverse effect bullet should really go here. I'm going to say it better in German because of my training. So you have to translate in a way that the subject matter expert and the audience will understand the meaning effectively, but that doesn't rewrite the content. So if you have a grammatically defensible Italian translation on brain surgery, the brain surgeries in Italy, they're looking at the translation and saying, well, I can follow this. We know what's being said, but this isn't how we talk. I don't trust the people behind this. We can get this done. The brain surgery is going to be successful, but this is not the language that we use. This is not how we talk. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if you swing too far in the direction of this is how we talk, language consistency and all of this stuff doesn't really matter, right? That's a problem too. So you have to have a harmony between linguistics and subject matter expertise. So many times somebody might say, well, yeah, I was asked if I have a clinical background expertise, and sure, I translated a trifold brochure about asthma once, or the importance of exercise, right? That's not exactly expertise. So you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen, but you've got to have subject matter experts married with linguistics.
That makes perfect sense. And it's something I hadn't thought about, I guess, before after us having this conversation. Because when I think of translations, I'm thinking, okay, it's word for word. You are translating what I wrote in English into Spanish or Italian. But that's not necessarily true because of the verb tenses and the way that the adjectives are formed. Yeah. So you have to change the language around a little bit.
You have to take some liberties. And that's why too conservative and too much QA isn't the answer either. If it is a word-for-word literal regurgitation of what source content says, no one's going to read it, no one's going to trust it, no one's going to stand behind it. I think it's important that a translator say, hey, what is the goal and reason and objective of doing this translation to begin with? What's your point B? How will you know if it's a successful outcome in translation? And somebody needs to be able to answer that. Are they just doing it to check the box because it's a regulatory requirement? Well, that's fine. But on what means will you gauge if it was a successful translation? And knowing that ahead of time will help the translation approach. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little about AI. And everyone's talking about AI like it's the future. But when it comes to clinical translations, like what's the real truth? Like what's the hype? And what actually works?
I think that I read a statistic that some 2/3 of translators are using AI in their work in some capacity, way, shape, or form in their tools. And that's probably accurate. That might be low for all I know. So large language models and AI, I don't believe are going anywhere. I was talking with a couple of scientists last night over dinner, and they told me they thought at their companies they were moving too quickly and too swiftly with it. It's not that they didn't want to see it employed, didn't see the benefits of it, but that we're moving way too fast and hurtling way too fast without checkpoints and so forth. Like it's this race, and we're always in a race in life sciences. Time is the enemy. So AI in translation has its place in reducing mundane tasks and freeing up the translator's mind for more creative, important work. And I think to check for errors and inconsistencies and things that the human brain misses. Sometimes I make the example of the board security guard patrolling the grounds at 3 a.m. every night for hours on end. Nothing ever happens. It's the same old. And then the footage shows somebody breaking over the wall and coming in, and they say, "How could you miss that?" And they say, "I just didn't see it. I didn't see it," because they get in a rut. Mm-hmm. Right? So this can happen if a translator is asked to just peruse 10,000 pages of French AI-generated content. They are going to miss things. It's a creep effect that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so that's not the answer either. AI has to be like a turbo option to help propel the translator when needed. It has to be an assistant. And it can be used in conjunction with other traditional translation tools, translation memory tools. The hype is off the charts right now. And I think more of a danger of AI in translation, it's the perception of what AI is and isn't. I heard another speaker say the other day, our platform with this CRO does this and it does that. And also, by the way, it handles translations. 97% accuracy at the push of a button. Japanese to English, 20,000 words, done. Seeing is believing, they told me. And I inherently doubt that highly. It's not going to capture. Now, it depends on the content. It absolutely depends on the content and the subject matter. In some cases, there might be some truth to that. And when it comes to AI, everybody is wrong and everybody is right. There are all different camps and factions and things involved. So it is happening. It is being used. And there are some serious potential data leaks and compromises and things because people aren't properly using on-premises network solutions and public-facing LLMs and tools and violating non-disclosure left and right. Absolutely, that is happening. So we're seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly. It can be beneficial. It's not the case where it's going to be 50% off and 80% faster for most applications. Not if it's going to be checked and ISO certified and verified. If the stakes are low and the exposure is low, well, the attitude a lot of the times is, who cares? We really didn't want to have to do this Russian and Chinese translation anyway. I got sick with it. I might not even be here at this company in a year anyway, if the you-know-what hits the fan. That really is the attitude with a lot of people. If they didn't have to do the translation, they wouldn't. So they're going to use the lowest cost approach. And everybody talks about quality. We all talk about quality. But don't you feel that it almost falls on deaf ears, that it's an inherent expectation at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we have to have a conversation about, what are you really trying to do here? Stop talking about the features of the damn drill and tell me about the hole in the wall that you want.
Do you think like the industry is becoming too reliant on machine translation, and like what's the hidden cost here of that convenience?
I wouldn't say that it's too reliant on it. If there's a legacy of successful translation work, don't fix it if it ain't broke. But if we're talking about more narrative work, certainly for more literacy-based translations, which is not in life sciences clinical trials, certainly, machine translation is not going to be well suited. And a lot of the times it can be B+ to C+ level quality. Sometimes you can't just undo it and fix it. Sometimes you can. And that's why it's worth having at your disposal as a tool. We can't, as translators, put our heads in the sand over this. We have to embrace it, check it out, be openly skeptical, trust but verify, all of that stuff. I wouldn't say that machine translation, we have an over-reliance on it. I would say that we have to be very judicious and careful about how that data is being maintained and archived and updated. Is it meshing with style guides that a client wants? Is it in congruence with what a translation reviewer wants? Sometimes reviewers say abroad, well, this is how we say such and such internally in the trenches here at our company. Nobody would ever know that. No translator would ever know that. the machine translation may likely not pick that up again and again and again, and you're reinventing the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's properly maintained and there's judicious oversight and staffing, but somebody's got to pay for that staffing and training and expertise. So I think translation costs like medical writing, patient recruitment, and other endeavors, the pricing is going lower, but it's a giant game of chicken. We're going to see more lawsuits. We're going to see more problems. How low is when we have bottomed out? I don't know the answer to that. You must see pricing issues all the time in your work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, let's say I'm an eTMF specialist and the company that I've worked for hired you as a vendor to translate documents. What documents should I be looking for translations? Besides like the obvious in terms of like a translated informed consent form.
Well, on the whole, I think it comes down to what's patient facing and what's not. We've translated a lot less protocols than we used to because it was determined why are we even having these translations done to begin with? Sometimes there's a need for it, but not anymore. So I think identifying which documents a patient may see, and there's been an argument for having them translated ahead of time and having them at your disposal ahead of time instead of this fire drill reaction and trying to beat the clock. And that's when errors statistically are going to happen more often. But to me, that's really the answer. I can't speak to specific documents per se, besides what you said, the obvious usual suspects. I would challenge that idea and say, do we have to have it translated? Has it historically been translated? At my old company that I worked at, did we have it translated? That's one of the very first things that you should do is round up a list of documents, website, content, software, whatever it might be, that you want to have translated. Maybe you break it up into phases, maybe not. Maybe it goes in one fell swoop. That's a great question, but I don't know. It's kind of like the sound of one tree falling in the forest.
Well, a lot of people talk about like you should get a translation certificate. Do I get one? Do I get 10? How does that work?
So this is an interesting point that you bring up, actually. What a lot of people don't realize is that there's no such thing as a legally certified translator in the U.S. Did we talk about this? I don't know if we have.
No.
So this comes as a surprise because to buy a pack of pencils in life sciences, you got to fill out 3 forms. Right? Everything is under regulatory scrutiny. And anyone who is bilingual in the U.S. can do a translation, any translation.
Wow.
If you, and this is why you hear about horror stories and bad translations and, Marco on the 3rd floor who's an engineer, but, speaks 2 languages, or the VP of marketing's son who interned once in France and therefore can do the child asset translation into French. This happens a lot. So what they try to do is have a statement of certification. And what the regulatory boards and FDA want to maintain is that it was properly conducted by someone who is in the profession. Right? It's a statement of which documents were translated into which languages, the translator name. It's a record that if you were to look at this 6 months or 6 years later, whether there's an audit or not, that you'll be able to quickly ascertain the details of who was behind this. And if there was a problem with the translation that led to the harm of a study or a patient, you better believe they're going to use that as either the get out of jail free card or, holding somebody accountable to it, which needs to happen. So that's all it is. It's a statement of assurance that, and it's a notarized document on company letterhead saying who did what to whom. When was it translated? What were the pertinent details with version numbers and controls and dates of the document? And that's why that needs to be updated all the time.
Wow.
When there are
I did
document
not
version
know
updates
that.
and so forth.
You've been in the business for a while now, and how are you personally leveraging AI to enhance, not replace, that human touch that's critical in this work?
So we are actively feeding documents through AI tools. That's what people want to know. How is AI impacting your business? Oh, blah, 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 blah. I understand those questions. That's fair enough. We use it more as an indirect tool. I think our translators say, all right, we're translating this medical device product. I think we have a good understanding of it. We've studied the documentation. I want to use AI to better learn the technology in the industry about how this tool works in order to better translate it. So that's how we typically will use AI as an assistant, as a tool, as a research arm. We will use it sometimes to brainstorm and ideate what might be an acceptable translation with some work. The problem with an AI-generated translation is that it might not match a past translation that was used 19 times in a study over 5 years. So you've got to redo it. If we take the example of a custom-built house, maybe we talked about this before, but sometimes, and somebody says, well, I bought the house, but I want the bathroom to go on the third floor, and I want the master bedroom from the second floor to the first floor, and I want to change up the whole house. You can do those things for a price, but isn't it inherently corrupt in the end? Isn't it better to bulldoze the house and rebuild it from scratch? And that's what happens with a 10,000 word AI generated translation. It might be okay. Somebody in the Philippines or Japan or France may understand it. And if it's a case where adequate is sufficient, there's not a high stakes, high exposure liability need for the translation, that's fine. I'll tell you a big conflict with translators is they're beautiful, brilliant people. And I had a discussion with someone not long ago about this, and they said, well, part of the compensation isn't always monetary for us. It's the nobility of doing it right, the dignity of celebrating cultures in our language and having a finely crafted, really good translation. Mwah. Well, if the corporate buyer says, I don't really care about any of that, that's well and fine. Great. Good for you. We need a C+ acceptable translation to get it done. Done is better than perfect in order to meet this other milestone, which is 10 times more important. The translation is kind of like the linchpin to get to that other milestone. And a lot of translators either don't want to hear that, they see it as a denigration of culture and language, and I understand that completely, and I agree with their viewpoint. But the buyer and the market determines quality and what they want. So this is kind of the role of the translation company, to be that intermediary party, to do what a translation buyer likely could not do on their own. And that dovetails into quality too. I don't know if you were going to get to that.
Well, you got me thinking. This is really sad, because if you and I were in another country, one of us is sick in a hospital and we need a translator because we don't speak their language. We want the best quality translation, not
Isn't it
the
funny how
C-level.
things change when you're on the other foot?
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because next thing you know, you might be donating an organ that you didn't want donated.
We are living in an era where AI has had a democratizing effect in terms of accessibility and speed. It's a raw, blunt, powerful instrument. And on a macro basis, it's incredible. I'm a big fan of what it can do. Look at epidemiology, look at legal contracts and finding errors and inconsistencies on massive volumes of text. On a micro basis, I'm not convinced that it's often more hindrance than help. So that doesn't mean do away with it, but it means exercise it with a big grain of salt. You're right. In the micro situation there, you're in a foreign country, you can't speak the language, you can't read the consent form, the policies, you don't know what charges you're going to be faced with, if you're going to be in all kinds of health trouble permanently, maybe as a result of this, what chances you're taking. You want the best and most accurate people involved behind you. It changes immediately. So trust is really low right now. I don't think it's that AI is getting better and better. I think that our standards have fallen lower and lower on the whole. So it's a giant game of musical chairs. We all acknowledge this. Look at what it cost us for an Uber ride instead of a taxi ride 20 or 30 years ago. But when you need that taxi ride at 3 a.m. and your life's on the line, you'll pay that all of a sudden. So when we look at clothing, medicine, education, music, and translation, there's this creep effect happening where because it's readily available, standards are going down further. It's not that, and the AI is getting a little bit better, but think about the house calls that doctors used to make in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Don't you think quality of care back then on a micro basis was better than today? But that model is not sustainable. But we've forgotten about that. And current generations have no idea that went on. So I think that is often what's going on. And that's why I talk about this game of chicken between translation buyers and linguists, that we're going to let quality go a little bit. I had a conversation with a CRO procurement manager recently, and this guy actually said, well, we think that there might be an appetite actually for lesser patient quality in translations if it means a more agreeable price point.
Imagine telling a patient that. We got a C-level translation here.
There's a lot of cynicism in clinical trials in general and in translation. Come on, they're not going to really read the consent form. They're going to gloss over it on the iPad or at the site, and they're going to initial here, sign here. People will say, do you read every, cell phone agreement update and software agreement update and things on our phones? So why should we pay premium top dollar for translations? Because it really doesn't matter. They won't say that outright, but that's the hidden cynicism and sentiment. So it doesn't really matter until it does, until there's a legal situation, until risk mitigation really comes into play. These are the balancing points that where we're at.
Can you break down how you built a system that delivers excellence thousands of times a year? Like, what separates your process from the rest of the industry?
I think the more boring you can get, the better. And we're kind of boring, vanilla, plain Jane. We just show up and do it right. And there's a lot of great services besides DTS too. There's some 26,000 translation companies. We are very proud to be over 50 years old. We're the little company that a lot of people haven't heard of. We're not throwing splashy parties at DIA and other shows, but we just have a systematic approach to operations. Some of the people that I've been blessed to cultivate and have believers in DTS and our mission, we kind of feel like it's very customer service driven. How do you make somebody feel at a biotech or a sponsor who isn't being heard? They're on the 140th floor, right, of some conglomerate. They're used to people ignoring them. They're used to late deliveries. They're used to bad listening and intake, just a terrible, arrogant experience with other buyers and suppliers. So when we do those things and listen to them and actually do what they asked for when they said they would like it, it's actually a shock. It's hiding in plain sight is what we do. Hiding in plain sight, all of the things that people say they do but don't do. One of our key interview questions with new people is this: you are waiting on an answer from a client, and it is Friday afternoon. You are tired. It's been a long week. You want to get the heck home. You've emailed, you've left voicemail messages, you need an answer, but you decide to get on the phone, on the road. And they do call you. Finally, you're in gridlock. It's holiday weekend. You are exhausted, and they give you the answer that you needed. Do you just go home and say, I'll tackle it on Monday? Or do you take the next exit and go all the way back? Do you do what you don't have to do? We've all had that experience with a credit card company or somebody at an airline, maybe even somebody, dare I say it, the IRS, right? Or some government entity where we dread having to call these people to resolve a problem, to fix a need. Today I'm finally going to do it. And you get somebody who's so proactive and so helpful and so efficient and so quick that we're shocked. What do we say? They say, is there anything else that you need, Nicole? Can I help you, Mr. Shaw, with anything further today? Yes. Can I deal with you the rest of my life? And they all say, well, no, we're all cross-trained here at XYZ, services. And that they're not. That's that one, the needle in a haystack person that you found. That's what I want DTS to be. And it's how you make people feel in the context of a structured operational environment. And I've got people that I've hired that are different than me, because to me, everybody being the same is very boring. How boring is that? I want people who disagree with me from time to time. Not all the time. That would get a little stressful too. But it makes you better. It makes you more open to other viewpoints. And we all acquiesce a little bit, and we all learn something. So I can talk about operational checkpoints and QA checkpoints. And it's this marriage between the human quality and the tech QA that we do. We have a pilot checklist. Every single order goes through the steps of QA, just because. Would you or I get on a plane, right, where they didn't have a pilot checklist? And they say, oh, come on, I've been doing this for 26 years, right? Of course we wouldn't. So the same thing, no matter how small and mundane the translation is or how complex it is, we go through this same multi-point checklist every single time. And I want to know after the fact, how did it work out for you? This was an expensive project. We're not going to know a week or a month later, but even the next 3 to 6 months, 9 months later, how did it pan out? There was an acquisition in France of an Italian laboratory company, and 14 user manuals had to be translated for that merger to happen. Did it happen? Was somebody really pissed off? Did it not happen? Were the translations a failure? Why? We really want to know and follow through. And I feel like I try to teach and preach. We do the little things that anybody could do, but most people don't. How many times when you buy a service does somebody actually follow up and say, how did it go, Nicole? How did I do? Give me the straight dope.
Right. Not treat them and street them.
On to the next one. On
right.
To the red.
Yeah. I love that. Going above and beyond, check in, point.
And you just have to be stubborn. You have to be resilient. You have to hang in there. Mental health is so important for all of us today. It really, really is, now more than ever. But you have to persevere. You have to see your role at DTS and whatever company you may work at as being a series of sprints in an ultra marathon. So sprint and rest, sprint and rest, sprint and rest. And I think we try to have fun. I always say, if you're having fun with what you're doing 3 days out of 5, you're probably in the right place. I won't say 5 days out of 5. That's why they call it work. And some days suck. But we like to have an element of fun and joy in what we do, and we're privileged to be able to do that. Not everyone in the world does. It's about survival. Mm-hmm. So when you do have that privilege and choice to have fun and seek joy with who you work with, why not do it?
So for decision makers that are listening right now who are sort of navigating those tight budgets and the global trials, like what's one principle they need to adopt today to protect their timelines, their data, and their reputation?
Well, I think of the old Russian saying, trust but verify, right? You have to be progressive. You have to be open-minded, but be conservative. Sometimes I think we criticize life sciences for being too conservative and too slow-moving to embrace change. So embrace change, be uncomfortable, take a chance, and we need to avoid complacency and stagnation. So those are a bunch of generalities, I know, but sometimes I hear people say, if I'm a buyer of translation or other things, I'm not necessarily looking for the lowest price. I'm looking for qualitative measures that give value and are going to show a long-term partnership because we're going to be in business together for the long haul. So those are values I would agree with too. Think not just about what you need to do today, this quarter, this year, but what 5 years from now looks like.
So at the end of the show, I always ask my guests 2 questions. And the first one is, what's your favorite trial master file document and why?
I got to go with the protocol. The study protocol is like the I-beam of the Ark of Noah. It is like the blueprint, the Bible. It's right, the Alpha and the Omega that is the basis for everything. So that's my pick is going to be the protocol itself. The humble protocol. What would you say is yours?
I say the delegation log. I think it just comes from the CRO background of just working in it, the checks and balances. It's just what lights up my light. And then I get a little chance to interact with the sites and say, hey, I need this, I need that. Who's this? So what's the best career advice you've ever received and who's it by?
My father instilled in me this idea to do your best. Always do your best. I remember being in a pool, a swimming pool, a YMCA or something. They put me in the wrong group of kids. I was in too advanced and I was crying and struggling. And my father was on the sideline saying, do your best. Do your best. You can get through this. And a lot of the times we think we're doing our best, but we may not truly. I'll tell you something about imposter syndrome a little bit. We know when we really have paid the price in learning and training and developing ourselves in some humility, lessons learned, getting stronger, getting more confident, and when we haven't. So I think that imposter syndrome is a real thing. Actually, people like to say, oh, it's real when we haven't paid the price, and we know it when we haven't. So that dovetailed with something one of my old bosses said early on. Before you quit an endeavor, are you really, really sure that you've given it everything you have, everything you've got? It's simple, but it's true. We know when we have and when we haven't. We want to give up so many times in life, whether it's business or going to a different field. We get so frustrated. We're so tired and worn down by life, but we know we truly haven't given it all. And sometimes when we have given it all and laid it all out there, then we can leave with confidence, knowing that it wasn't the right fit or we're going to go in a different direction. The best career advice is show up, give it your all, and don't give up.
So wise. Duncan, thank you so much for joining me on the TMF Daily Podcast.
Thank you, Nicole. This has been a real pleasure today.